Lauren Mitchell had never been afraid of interviews. She had sat through dozens of them over the years, answering questions about her education, her experience with children, her references from families in Florence. But standing outside the iron gates of the Pellegrini estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, she felt something different settle in her stomach. Not quite fear, not quite excitement. Something heavier. The agency had been cleared during the phone call 3 days ago. The position paid extremely well. Too well, actually. $2,500 a week for one child. Live out, Monday through Friday. But there were complications. The boy, Matteo, 4 years old, had not spoken more than a handful of words in 2 years. His mother had passed away. His father was demanding, impossible to please, and had already dismissed 17 nannies in the last 18 months. Lauren had asked the obvious question. Why does he keep hiring if no one meets his standards? The woman on the phone had hesitated before answering. Because he needs help. He just refuses to admit how much. Now, as Lauren stepped through the gates after security cleared her identification, she understood why the salary was so high. The house was not just a house, it was a fortress. Cameras on every corner. Guards positioned along the driveway. Tall hedges blocking the view from the road. Everything about the property screamed control, protection, privacy. She walked up the stone pathway toward the front entrance, her portfolio tucked under one arm, her hair pulled back neatly. She had chosen simple clothes, nothing flashy. Navy pants, a white blouse, flat shoes. Professional but approachable. She wanted to look like someone who cared about children, not someone trying to impress a wealthy employer. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a gray uniform, greeted her with a polite but distant smile. "Miss Mitchell?" "Yes. Follow me, please. Mr. Pellegrini is expecting you." Lauren stepped inside. The foyer was massive, with marble floors that reflected the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Everything was pristine, elegant, cold. There were no toys scattered on the floor, no children's drawings taped to the walls, no signs that a 4-year-old lived here at all. The woman led her down a hallway, lined with expensive paintings and dark wood paneling. They stopped in front of a closed door. The woman knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. "Miss Mitchell, sir." "Send her in." The voice was deep, controlled, and completely devoid of warmth. Lauren stepped inside. The office was just as intimidating as the rest of the house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk made of dark wood, leather chairs that looked like they cost more than her car. And behind the desk sat Anthony Pellegrini. He was younger than she expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair, sharp jawline, broad shoulders that filled out his black suit perfectly. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Brown, almost black, and so intense she had to force herself not to look away. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Lauren sat, placing her portfolio on her lap. She kept her posture straight, her hands folded, her expression calm. She had learned a long time ago that confidence mattered in these situations, especially with men like him. Anthony did not waste time with pleasantries. "The agency sent your file. 3 years in Florence working as an au pair. Degree in early childhood education. Clean background check. No criminal record, no debt, no red flags." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Why did you come back to the States?" Lauren met his gaze. "My parents passed away in a car accident 2 years ago. I came home to handle their estate and decided to stay. Do you have other family here?" "No." "Friends?" "A few." "Boyfriend? Husband?" "No." Anthony nodded slowly, as if filing away each answer. "You speak Italian." "Fluently. Where did you learn?" "In Florence. I worked with 3 different families over the course of 3 years. The children only spoke Italian at home, so I had to learn quickly." "And you enjoyed it?" It was not a question, but Lauren answered anyway. "Yes, very much. The language, the culture, the people. It was the happiest time of my life." Something flickered across Anthony's face, but it was gone before Lauren could identify it. "My son does not speak," Anthony said bluntly. He has not had a full conversation with anyone outside of immediate family in 2 years. The doctors say there is nothing physically wrong with him. He simply chooses not to talk. Do you think you can handle that? I think I can try. Trying is not good enough. I need someone who can reach him. Lauren straightened slightly. With respect, Mr. Pellegrini, I cannot promise results. Every child is different. But I can promise that I will be patient, consistent, and kind. If Matteo needs time, I will give him time. If he needs space, I will give him space. And if he needs someone who will not give up on him, I will be that person. Anthony stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood. Come with me. He led her out of the office, down another hallway, up a staircase. The house seemed endless. Every room they passed was immaculate, untouched. Finally, they stopped in front of a door with a small sign that read, Matteo's Playroom. Anthony pushed the door open but did not step inside. He has been in there for the last hour. Alone. He prefers it that way. His voice was tight, strained. Go in. See if you can get him to acknowledge you. If he does, we will talk about employment. If he does not, you can leave. Lauren nodded. She stepped inside, and Anthony closed the door behind her. The room was bright, filled with toys, books, puzzles, everything a child could want. But in the center of it all, sitting on the floor with his back to her, was Matteo. He was small for his age, with dark hair like his father, and a blue shirt that looked freshly pressed. He was building something with wooden blocks, stacking them carefully, methodically. He did not turn around when Lauren entered. He did not acknowledge her presence at all. Lauren did not rush toward him. She did not crouch down and invade his space with forced cheerfulness. Instead, she walked quietly to the bookshelf on the opposite side of the room and sat down on the floor, a few feet away from him. She pulled a picture book off the shelf and opened it, flipping through the pages slowly. She did not look at Matteo. She did not try to make conversation. She simply let him exist in his own world, while she existed in hers. After a few minutes, she began to hum. Softly at first, almost under her breath. It was a melody she had learned in Florence, a lullaby that one of the mothers used to sing to her daughter every night. Stella Stellina. Little star. Matteo's hands froze mid-movement. Lauren kept humming, her voice gentle and steady. She turned another page in the book, still not looking at him. Slowly, Matteo turned his head. His dark eyes, so much like his father's, focused on her for the first time. Lauren continued humming, adding the words now. Her Italian was smooth, natural, the accent she had worked so hard to perfect in Florence coming through clearly. Matteo stood up. He took one step toward her, then another, then another. Lauren kept her gaze on the book, giving him space to approach on his own terms. When he was close enough, Matteo sat down beside her. He did not say anything. He did not smile, but he leaned his head against her arm, his small body pressing into hers with a trust that felt both fragile and absolute. Lauren's chest tightened. She kept singing, her voice soft, her hand resting gently on his back. The door burst open. Anthony stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. His eyes moved from Matteo, leaning against Lauren, to Lauren, who had stopped singing mid-verse. Who taught you that song? His voice was sharp, almost angry. Lauren blinked, confused by the intensity of his reaction. A family I worked for in Florence. The mother was from Milan. She sang it to her daughter every night. Anthony's face went pale. He stepped into the room, his movements stiff, controlled. What was her name? The mother? Her name was Clara Berti. No. The song. What is it called? Stella Stellina. Anthony exhaled slowly. His jaw tightened. He looked at Matteo, who was still leaning against Lauren, his eyes half closed, peaceful in a way that seemed impossible. My wife used to sing that to him, Anthony said quietly, every night before bed. She was from Milan. Lauren's stomach dropped. She looked down at Matteo, understanding now why the boy had reacted so strongly. The song was not just a melody, it was a memory. I did not know, Lauren said softly. I am so sorry. Do not apologize. Anthony's voice was firm, though his expression had softened slightly. "You just did something 17 other people could not do. You reached him." He crossed the room and knelt beside Matteo. The boy lifted his head from Lauren's arm and looked at his father. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Anthony placed a hand on his son's head, his thumb brushing through the dark curls. "You are hired," Anthony said, standing abruptly. $2,500 a week, Monday through Friday, 8 in the morning until 6 at night. You will receive a full benefits package, paid time off, and bonuses based on Matteo's progress. Lauren stood as well, careful not to disturb Matteo, who had returned to his blocks. "That is very generous." "It is necessary." Anthony walked toward the door, then paused. "There are 2 rules you need to follow. First, you do not ask questions about my wife. Second, you do not ask questions about my work. If you can follow those rules, we will not have problems." Lauren nodded slowly. "I understand." Anthony studied her for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she truly did. Then he turned and left the room without another word. Lauren stood there, watching Matteo stack his blocks, and she felt the weight of what she had just agreed to settle over her shoulders. This was not just a job. This was a family that had been shattered, and somehow, she had just become part of the process of putting it back together. She did not know if she was strong enough for that. But as Matteo glanced back at her, his expression still guarded, but no longer distant, she realized she was going to try. The first week passed in careful increments. Lauren arrived every morning at 8 sharp, her bag packed with books she thought Matteo might enjoy, notebooks to track his progress, and a patience she had learned during her years in Florence. The mansion felt different in daylight, less like a fortress, and more like a carefully constructed puzzle where every piece had been placed with intention. Matteo did not speak. Not on Monday, not on Tuesday, not by the end of the week. But he began to respond in other ways. A nod when Lauren asked if he wanted juice. A shake of his head when she suggested going outside. Small gestures that felt monumental, given what Anthony had told her about the previous 17 nannies. Lauren established a routine quickly. Mornings were for structured activities, puzzles and building blocks, simple tasks that required focus but not pressure. Afternoons were for stories, always in Italian, always chosen by Matteo from the shelf Lauren had organized by difficulty level. She never forced him to engage. She simply created space for him to exist without expectations. Every evening before she left, Lauren wrote detailed notes in a leather journal Anthony had provided. She documented everything. What Matteo ate, how long he played independently, whether he made eye contact, how many times he responded physically to questions. She left the journal on the kitchen counter each night before heading home to her small apartment in Stamford. What Lauren did not know, could not have known, was that Anthony read every word. He came downstairs long after Matteo was asleep, after the house had gone quiet except for the security team making their rounds. He sat at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey he rarely finished, and read Lauren's careful observations with an attention he gave to few things outside of business. On Thursday of the first week, he wrote a single sentence at the bottom of her entry. "Continue like this." Lauren found it Friday morning. The handwriting was sharp, precise, controlled. She traced her finger over the words and felt something shift. Not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. Anthony Pellegrini noticed her work. That mattered more than it probably should have. By the second week, Matteo began whispering. Single words in Italian, so quiet Lauren had to lean closer to hear them. "Si," when she asked if he liked the story. "No," when she suggested putting away his favorite toy. His voice was soft, hesitant, like he was testing whether speaking would break something fragile inside him. Lauren celebrated each word privately, keeping her reactions measured so she would not overwhelm him. But inside, her chest swelled with something close to pride. This child, who had been silent for 2 years, was finding his voice again. Slowly, carefully, but undeniably. The house itself revealed details Lauren had not noticed during the interview. Cameras in every room, small and discreet but unmistakable once you knew to look for them. Men in dark suits who appeared in hallways without making sound, their eyes constantly scanning, assessing. Doors that locked with codes instead of keys. windows that did not open all the way. Lauren did not ask questions. Anthony had been clear about that boundary. But she noticed, and noticing made her wonder what kind of danger required this level of protection. One night during the second week, Lauren stayed late to finish a puzzle with Matteo. It was nearly 8 when she finally packed her bag and headed downstairs. The house was darker at this hour, quieter. She was halfway to the front door when she heard Anthony's voice coming from his office. He was speaking Italian. Fast, clipped, angry. Lauren slowed her steps. She should have kept walking, should have minded her own business. But the tone in his voice, the sharp edge of warning, made her pause near the partially open door. "Tell the Russians the port is non-negotiable," Anthony said. "I do not care what leverage they think they have. That territory stays mine." A pause. Then his voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "If they push harder, they will learn exactly why no one challenges me twice." Lauren's pulse spiked. She moved away from the door quickly, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. Russians, territory, leverage. The words circled in her mind as she left the mansion and drove home through the dark Connecticut streets. She did not mention it the next day, or the day after that. She focused on Matteo, on the routines they had built, on the slow progress that felt more valuable than any answer Anthony might have given her. The third week brought a breakthrough. Matteo was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with crayons while Lauren prepared his afternoon snack. He finished his juice box and set it down carefully, then looked up at her. "Lauren," he said clearly, "posso avere ancora un po' di latte?" Lauren froze, the glass in her hand suspended mid-air. It was a full sentence. Subject, verb, object. In Italian. And Lauren understood every word. "Can I have more milk?" She set the glass down and filled it with milk, her hand steady despite the emotion rising in her throat. "Of course you can," she said, keeping her voice normal. "Easy." Matteo took the glass and drank, as if he had not just accomplished something extraordinary. Lauren heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Anthony standing in the doorway. He must have been nearby, must have heard. His expression was carefully controlled, but his eyes betrayed him. Emotion flickered there, raw and unguarded for just a moment, before he locked it away again. "Good," Anthony said, his voice rougher than usual. "That is very good, Matteo." Matteo looked at his father and smiled. A small smile, barely there, but real. Anthony nodded once and left the kitchen without another word. That evening, Anthony did something unexpected. When Lauren brought Matteo downstairs after his bath, freshly dressed in pajamas and smelling like lavender soap, Anthony was waiting in the dining room. "You will eat dinner with us tonight," he said. Not an invitation, a statement. Lauren hesitated. "I usually eat at home. Tonight you eat here." The table was set for 3. Lauren sat across from Matteo with Anthony at the head. The meal was simple but elegant. Pasta with vegetables, bread that smelled like it had been baked that afternoon, water in crystal glasses. They ate in silence at first. Then Anthony began asking questions. "How long have you lived in Stamford?" 2 years, Lauren answered. "I moved there after my parents passed. Do you like it?" "It is fine. Close enough to work. Affordable. You have family nearby?" "No. My parents were only children. No aunts, uncles, cousins. That must be lonely." Lauren met his eyes. "Sometimes?" Anthony nodded slowly, as if cataloging her answer alongside all the other information he had gathered about her. "I have a friend visiting this weekend," Lauren said, surprising herself. "Samantha. We met in college. She teaches 3rd grade in Brooklyn." Anthony's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightened. "What day is she visiting?" "Saturday. Just for the afternoon." "Where did you meet her?" "I told you. College. We were roommates freshman year. How often do you see her?" Lauren frowned. "Once a month, maybe." "Why does it matter?" Anthony set down his fork. "Anyone who comes near you or Matteo matters. I need to know who she is. She is my best friend. She is not a threat. I will decide that." Lauren felt heat rise in her chest. "Excuse me?" Anthony did not flinch. "I will have someone verify her background. Standard procedure." "Standard procedure?" Lauren's voice rose slightly. You want to run a background check on my friend? Yes. Without asking me first? I am telling you now. Lauren stared at him, anger mixing with disbelief. That is invasive and unnecessary. That is how I keep my son safe. From a third-grade teacher in Brooklyn? Anthony leaned forward. From anyone who has not been properly vetted. Lauren stood abruptly. Mateo looked between them, his eyes wide. She forced herself to sit back down, to soften her expression for the boy's sake. I need to put Mateo to bed, she said quietly. Anthony nodded. We will discuss this later. Later came after Mateo was asleep, after Lauren had sung Stella Stellina and watched his eyes drift closed, after she had tucked the blanket around his small body and turned on the nightlight shaped like a moon. She found Anthony in the hallway outside Mateo's room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. I need to understand something, Lauren said, keeping her voice low. Why is security so extreme here? Cameras, guards, background checks on elementary school teachers? What exactly are you protecting Mateo from? Anthony's expression hardened. You agreed not to ask questions about my work. This is not about your work. This is about my life, my privacy, my friends. Your friends become part of this house when they visit. That makes them my concern. Lauren stepped closer. You cannot control everything. I can try. His voice was cold, final. Why? She pushed. What happened that made you this afraid? For a moment, Anthony said nothing. Then his eyes softened, just enough for her to see the pain beneath the ice. Because I already lost people for not being careful enough, he said quietly, and I will not make that mistake again. The raw honesty in his voice stopped her anger cold. She saw it then, the weight he carried, the fear that lived underneath all the control and protection. I am sorry, Lauren said, for whatever you lost. Anthony straightened, the walls going back up. Mateo asked for you tonight. When I put him to bed before, he asked if you would be there. Lauren's throat tightened. What did you say? I said you were downstairs, that you would be back tomorrow. He paused. He has not asked for anyone in 2 years, not even me. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and devastating. I will be here tomorrow, Lauren said softly, and every day after that. Anthony nodded once. Then he walked past her toward the stairs, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Lauren stood outside Mateo's door for a long time, listening to the boy's steady breathing through the crack, and she understood something she had not fully grasped before. This family was not just broken. They were surviving. And somehow, impossibly, she had become part of that survival. Samantha Cooper arrived Saturday afternoon with a bag full of pastries from a bakery in Brooklyn and a smile that lit up the entire foyer. Lauren had not realized how much she missed having someone from her old life around until her best friend walked through the door. This place is insane, Samantha whispered, as they walked through the mansion toward the back garden. You did not tell me it was a literal castle. It is not a castle, Lauren said, though she understood what Samantha meant. The house had a presence that went beyond architecture. Does he have a moat too? Knights in armor? Lauren laughed. Stop. They found Mateo in the garden, crouched near a row of flowers, examining a ladybug crawling across a leaf. When he saw Lauren, his face brightened immediately. Lauren, look, he said in Italian, pointing at the insect. Samantha's eyebrows shot up. He talks? Sometimes, Lauren answered. We are working on it. Mateo approached them slowly, his curiosity overcoming his usual shyness. Lauren knelt down to his level. Mateo, this is my friend Samantha. She is very nice. Hi, Mateo, Samantha said gently. Mateo studied her for a moment, then looked back at Lauren. Can she play with us? If she wants to. I would love to, Samantha said. They spent the afternoon in the garden. Mateo showed them his favorite hiding spots, the tree he liked to sit under, the rocks he collected and lined up by size. He laughed when Samantha pretended to lose at hide and seek, a genuine, bright sound that Lauren had never heard from him before. From his office window on the second floor, Anthony watched them. He had been reviewing contracts for the last hour, but his attention kept drifting to the garden, to Mateo running between the hedges with more energy than Anthony had seen in 2 years, to Lauren, who moved through the space with an ease that made everything look simple, to the friend who made Lauren throw her head back in laughter. her guard completely down in a way it never was inside the house. Anthony's chest tightened. He did not want to name what he felt watching her like this. Naming it would make it real, and real meant complicated, and complicated meant dangerous. He forced himself back to the contracts. By evening, after Samantha had left with promises to visit again soon, Lauren noticed the shift in atmosphere. Mateo was more animated during dinner, talking about the ladybug and the game they played, his words coming faster and with less hesitation. Anthony listened, nodding in the right places, but his expression was distant, preoccupied. Samantha said something funny today, Lauren mentioned as she helped Mateo with his pasta. Anthony looked up. What did she say? That an overprotective, mysterious boss is a romance novel cliché. Lauren smiled. I told her she watches too much television. Anthony's jaw tensed. And what did she say to that? That I should be careful anyway. Lauren met his eyes. I told her there was nothing to be careful about. Something flickered across Anthony's face, too quick for Lauren to catch. After dinner, Lauren took Mateo upstairs for his bath and bedtime routine. She sang Stella Stellina while he drifted off, his small hand wrapped around her finger. When his breathing evened out, she carefully extracted her hand and stood, turning off the main light and leaving only the moon-shaped nightlight glowing softly. She was halfway down the hallway when she heard it. A scream, high-pitched, terrified, coming from Mateo's room. Lauren spun around and ran back, her heart slamming against her ribs. She pushed the door open and found Mateo sitting up in bed, his face twisted in fear, tears streaming down his cheeks. He was shouting in Italian, the words tumbling over each other in panic. No, leave her alone. Mama! The bad men are taking Mama. Lauren rushed to him, but Anthony was already there. She had not heard him come up the stairs, had not seen him in the hallway, but he was beside the bed, frozen. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wide, locked on his son with an expression that looked like pure horror. Anthony, Lauren said. He did not respond. He just stood there, paralyzed, as Mateo continued screaming. Lauren made a decision. She moved past Anthony and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Mateo into her arms. The boy clung to her immediately, his small body trembling violently. Shh, you are safe, Lauren whispered, rocking him gently. No one is going to hurt you. You are home. You are with me. She began singing, soft and low, the same lullaby she always sang. Stella Stellina. Her voice was steady even though her pulse was racing. Mateo's screams faded to sobs, then to hiccups, then to quiet whimpers. He pressed his face into her shoulder, his fingers gripping her shirt like a lifeline. Anthony finally moved. He sank into the chair beside the bed, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. Lauren had never seen him like this. The powerful, controlled man who ran an empire was completely shattered. After what felt like an eternity, Mateo's breathing evened out. He fell back asleep in Lauren's arms, exhausted from the nightmare. She carefully laid him back down, tucked the blanket around him and stroked his hair until she was certain he would not wake again. When she finally stood, Anthony was still sitting in the chair, staring at nothing. Anthony, Lauren said quietly. He looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, raw. He never spoke about that night before, he whispered. Not once in 2 years. I thought he had forgotten. Lauren's throat tightened. Come on, let me make you tea. I do not need tea. You need something. She led him out of the room, leaving the door cracked so they could hear if Mateo called out again. They went downstairs to the kitchen. Lauren filled the kettle and set it on the stove, then opened cabinets until she found mugs and tea bags. Anthony sat at the kitchen table, his posture rigid, his hands still trembling slightly. You do not have to carry everything alone, Lauren said as she poured hot water over the tea. Not with me. That was all it took. Something inside Anthony broke. He exhaled sharply, the sound almost like a sob he refused to release. Her name was Bianca, he said. My wife. She was from Milan. We met when I was there for business, married 6 months later. She was everything light and warm and good about the world. His voice cracked. 2 years ago, she was killed during what the police called a robbery. Wrong place, wrong time, they said. But I know better. Lauren set the tea in front of him and sat down across the table. She did not interrupt. She just listened. It was not random, Anthony continued. It was a message. A rival organization testing my defenses, seeing if they could hurt me by targeting someone I loved. They succeeded. He gripped the mug so hard his knuckles turned white. Matteo was with her. He saw part of what happened. The police found him hiding in a closet. Silent, unharmed physically, but destroyed in every other way. Lauren felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. Since that night, I have focused on 2 things, Anthony said. Security and revenge. I built walls around everything, hired more guards, installed more cameras, made sure no one could get close to us again. And I made sure the people responsible suffered. He looked up at her. But in doing all of that, I neglected the one person who needed me most. I could not go into his room without seeing Bianca tucking him in. I could not read him stories without hearing her voice. I could not be the father he needed because every time I tried, I relived the night I lost her. Lauren reached across the table and placed her hand over his. You did the best you could. My best was not good enough. Your best kept him alive, kept him safe. That matters. Anthony stared at their hands, his expression tortured. He is 4 years old, and he has nightmares about watching his mother die. How do I fix that? You cannot fix it, Lauren said gently. But you can be there when he wakes up scared. You can hold him. You can remind him that he is not alone. I froze tonight. I saw him screaming, and I could not move, because it hurt, because it brought everything back. Lauren squeezed his hand. But you were there. That is what counts. Anthony looked at her, really looked at her, and Lauren saw something shift in his expression. Gratitude, yes, but something else too, something deeper and more dangerous. My parents died in a car accident, Lauren said quietly. For 2 years after, I avoided their birthdays, their anniversary, every date that reminded me they were gone. I thought if I did not acknowledge the pain, it would eventually disappear, but it did not. It just grew heavier. She paused. A friend finally told me that honoring memories does not mean living in the past. It means carrying the love forward, living fully, not avoiding everything that hurts. Anthony's jaw worked. How do you do that? Live fully after losing someone? You start small. You let yourself feel the grief instead of burying it. You talk about them. You remember the good parts. Lauren's voice softened. And you let the people who care about you help carry the weight. They sat in silence for a long time, the tea growing cold between them. Finally, Anthony spoke. Thank you. For tonight. For Matteo. For this. You do not have to thank me. Yes, I do. The following days were different. Anthony began showing up for breakfast, sitting at the table with Matteo and Lauren, asking his son about his plans for the day. He joined them in the garden after work, pushing Matteo on the swing, helping him build towers out of sticks and rocks. He read stories at bedtime, his voice halting at first, but growing steadier each night. Matteo blossomed under the attention. His vocabulary expanded daily. He started asking questions, telling jokes, singing the songs Lauren taught him. The silent, withdrawn child Lauren had met a month ago was disappearing, replaced by a bright, curious boy who was finally allowed to be 4 years old. Lauren watched the transformation with a satisfaction that went bone deep. This was why she had chosen her career. These moments when a child rediscovered joy. But she also noticed something else. Anthony watched her constantly. When he thought she was focused on Matteo, his eyes would linger on her face. When she laughed at something Matteo said, Anthony's expression would soften in a way that made her chest feel tight. When she stood to leave each evening, he always found a reason to walk her to the door, to say one more thing, to delay her departure by just a few more minutes. Lauren told herself it meant nothing. He was grateful. That was all. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she replayed those moments, the way his hand had felt under hers at the kitchen table, the raw vulnerability in his voice when he spoke about Bianca, the way he looked at her like she was solving a problem he had not known how to fix. She was falling for him, She knew it with a certainty that terrified her. And based on the way his gaze followed her through every room, she was starting to suspect he felt the same. By the 6th week, Anthony had become a consistent presence in Mateo's daily life. He no longer disappeared into his office for 12-hour stretches. He ate breakfast with them, joined afternoon activities in the garden, read stories before bed. The transformation was remarkable, not just in Mateo but in Anthony himself. The hard edges had softened. The constant tension in his shoulders had eased. He smiled more, though the smiles were still rare and fleeting. Lauren tried not to think about what that meant for her. Tried not to notice how her pulse quickened when Anthony walked into a room. Tried not to replay the night in the kitchen when his hand had trembled under hers, and he had opened up about Bianca with a vulnerability that had cracked something inside her chest. She was failing spectacularly at all of it. Monday morning of the 8th week, Anthony appeared in the playroom doorway while Lauren was helping Mateo build an elaborate tower out of wooden blocks. His expression was tense, his jaw tight in a way Lauren had not seen in days. "I need to go to Boston," he said without preamble. "Business meeting. It cannot be postponed." Mateo looked up from his blocks, his dark eyes widening. "When?" "Tonight. I will be gone overnight, back tomorrow afternoon." Mateo's face crumpled. "No. You cannot go. You have to stay here. Mateo, I have to work." "No!" The boy's voice rose, panic threading through it. "You cannot leave. What if something happens? What if you do not come back?" Anthony's expression shifted to something Lauren recognized immediately. Guilt. Fear. The same look he had worn the night Mateo screamed about his mother. Lauren stood and moved to Mateo's side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your papa will come back, I promise. You do not know that," Mateo said, tears spilling down his cheeks now. Mama did not come back. The room went silent. Anthony looked like he had been struck. Lauren knelt beside Mateo, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I understand why you are scared. But your papa is not going away forever. He is going to Boston for one night, and then he will be home. Right, Anthony?" Anthony cleared his throat. "Right. Just one night." Mateo shook his head, clinging to Lauren's arm. "I do not want him to go." "What if?" Lauren said slowly, an idea forming. "Your papa calls us 3 times tomorrow. Once in the morning, once at lunch, once before bed. And what if he records a special message you can listen to tonight when you go to sleep?" Mateo hesitated, considering this. "He would do that?" "Yes," Anthony said immediately. "I will call as many times as you want." "And," Lauren added, "what if your papa leaves something special here for you to take care of while he is gone? Something important of his, so you know he is coming back to get it." Anthony caught on quickly. He removed the silver watch from his wrist, the one Lauren had noticed he wore every single day, and held it out to Mateo. "This was my father's watch. It is very important to me. I need you to keep it safe until I get home tomorrow. Can you do that?" Mateo stared at the watch, then slowly reached out and took it. The metal band was too large for his small wrist, but he clutched it against his chest like a treasure. "I will keep it safe," Mateo whispered. Anthony knelt down and pulled his son into a tight embrace. "I will be back before you know it. I promise." That evening, after Anthony had left for Boston and Mateo was finally asleep with the watch tucked under his pillow, Lauren sat in the quiet playroom organizing toys and trying not to think about how empty the house felt without Anthony's presence. Her phone buzzed. A video call. She answered, and Anthony's face filled the screen. He was in a hotel room, his tie loosened, his expression tired. "Is he asleep?" Anthony asked. "Yes, finally." He kept asking if you had called yet. "I recorded the message. Did it help?" "It did." He listened to it 3 times before he closed his eyes. Anthony exhaled, relief evident. "Thank you. For today. For knowing what to say when I did not. You did fine." I froze again. I saw his fear, and all I could think about was Bianca, about the night she did not come home. I could not find words to comfort him. Lauren adjusted her position on the couch, tucking her legs beneath her. "You found them eventually. That is what matters." They talked for a few more minutes about Mateo, about the schedule for tomorrow, about practical things. Then, Just as Lauren was about to say goodnight, Anthony spoke again. "How was your day?" "Beyond managing my son's panic attack." Lauren blinked, surprised. "My day?" "Yes, you. How are you?" It was such a simple question, but coming from Anthony Pellegrini, it felt significant. No employer had ever asked her that before, not with genuine interest. "I am fine," Lauren said. "Tired. Looking forward to a glass of wine and terrible reality television." Anthony smiled slightly. What kind of terrible reality television? The kind where people compete to win roses or survive on islands or renovate houses in 48 hours. That does sound terrible. "It is excellent," Lauren corrected. "Terrible in the best possible way." They fell into easy conversation then, about nothing and everything. Anthony asked about her favorite memories from Florence, and Lauren told him about the tiny restaurant near the Duomo where she ate pasta carbonara every Sunday. She asked if he had ever been to Florence, and his expression softened. "Yes, Bianca and I spent our honeymoon there. It was her favorite city." He paused. "It was mine too, after that trip. We stayed in a hotel overlooking the Arno River. We would wake up early and walk through the streets before the tourists arrived, when everything was quiet and golden." Lauren noticed something important. When Anthony spoke about Bianca now, his voice carried nostalgia instead of raw grief. The memories did not seem to hurt him the way they had before. "It sounds beautiful," Lauren said. It was. Anthony leaned back in his chair. "You should go back someday. I think you left part of yourself there. Maybe. Someday." They talked for over an hour. About Italian art. About the galleries Lauren used to visit. About books they had both read and disagreed about. Anthony mentioned a rare collection of Italian poetry he had seen at an auction last year, and Lauren admitted she had wanted to buy a specific volume from that collection, but could never afford it. When they finally said goodnight, Lauren sat alone in the dark playroom for a long time, her phone still warm in her hand, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was in trouble. This was not just attraction anymore. This was deeper, more dangerous. She was falling for a man she could not have, in a situation that could never work. Anthony returned the next afternoon exactly when he promised. Matteo ran to him the moment he walked through the door, and Anthony scooped him up, holding him close while Matteo chattered in Italian about everything he had done while his father was away. "And I kept your watch safe," Matteo said proudly, pulling it from his pocket. "Just like I promised." "Thank you," Anthony said, fastening it back on his wrist. Then he looked over Matteo's head at Lauren. "Thank you." She nodded, trying to ignore the way her heart stuttered when their eyes met. That evening, after Matteo was in bed, Anthony found Lauren in the library. She was curling up in one of the leather chairs with a book when he knocked on the open door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course." He walked in carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I picked this up in Boston. For you." Lauren set down her book and took the package, confused. She unwrapped it carefully and stopped breathing. It was the poetry book, the exact volume she had mentioned wanting during their call last night. A first edition, leather-bound, probably worth more than several months of her salary. "Anthony, I cannot accept this. It is too much. You mentioned it once, on our call last night in passing. You probably do not even remember. But I did." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "You spend all your time making sure Matteo has what he needs, making sure I have what I need. You should have things that make you happy too." Lauren stared at the book, her throat tight with emotion she could not name. "Thank you. This is incredibly thoughtful. You are welcome." He should have left then. The conversation was over, the gift given. But he did not move. Neither did Lauren. The library felt smaller suddenly, more intimate. The lamp on the side table cast warm light across Anthony's face, softening the hard lines, making him look less like the dangerous man everyone feared, and more like someone exhausted and lonely and trying his best. "The trip went well?" Lauren asked, just to fill the silence. "Yes." "Negotiations were successful." "Good." More silence. Heavier this time. Lauren noticed details she should not have been noticing. The way Anthony's shirt fit across his shoulders. The faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. The way his eyes kept moving to her lips before jerking away. I should let you get back to your book, Anthony said. Right, yes. He turned to leave, then stopped. Lauren. Yes? Last night, talking with you. It was the best part of my day. Before she could respond, he was gone. The 9th week started with roses. The gardener, a young man in his 20s named David who had worked at the estate for 6 months, cornered Lauren in the garden while she was supervising Mateo's playtime. Miss Mitchell, can I ask your opinion on something? David gestured to the rose bushes along the south wall. I am thinking about adding some new varieties. You mentioned once that you liked gardens. What colors do you think would look best here? Lauren glanced at the roses, then back at Mateo, who was occupied with his trucks. Maybe some pale pink? Or cream. Something softer than the red. Cream roses. I like that. David smiled at her, friendly and open. You have good taste. My girlfriend always says I am terrible at color combinations. They talked for a few more minutes about flowers, about David's girlfriend who was studying horticulture, about nothing particularly important. It was a pleasant, easy conversation. Lauren did not notice Anthony watching from his office window. Did not see the way his jaw clenched when David laughed at something she said. Did not see him pull out his phone and make a call that lasted less than 30 seconds. 2 days later, David was gone. Lauren found out when she asked one of the housekeepers where he was, needing to ask about watering schedules for the vegetable garden she and Mateo had planted. Mr. Pellegrini transferred him to the property in Westchester, the housekeeper said. Effective immediately. Why? The woman shrugged. I do not ask questions about Mr. Pellegrini's decisions. Lauren's hands curled into fists. She marched directly to Anthony's office and knocked once before pushing the door open without waiting for permission. Anthony looked up from his laptop, surprised. Lauren, you fired David. I transferred him. There is a difference. Why? The Westchester property needed additional landscaping staff. It made sense to move him there. Lauren stepped further into the office, closing the door behind her. That is not true. You transferred him because he talked to me. Anthony's expression went carefully blank. That is a significant leap in logic. Is it? Because this is the second staff member you have moved away from me in the last month. First the previous gardener, now David. I run an estate with multiple properties. Staff transfers happen. Not like this. Not overnight without warning. Lauren crossed her arms. This is about control. You cannot stand the idea of anyone getting close to me. That is not what this is. Then what is it, Anthony? Explain it to me. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You want the truth? Fine. I did not like how he looked at you. I did not like how comfortable you seemed talking to him. I did not like any of it, and I made sure it would not continue. Lauren stared at him, shocked by the blunt admission. You transferred him because you were jealous? Yes. No hesitation. No attempt to soften it. That is completely inappropriate. I know. You cannot control who I talk to. I can control who works on my property. This is not about property management. This is about something else entirely. Anthony moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. His eyes were dark, intense, burning with something that made Lauren's breath catch. You are right, he said quietly. This is about something else. The air between them felt electric. Dangerous? Lauren knew she should step back, should leave, should do anything except stand there watching him come closer. Anthony, his name came out barely above a whisper. Tell me you do not feel it too, he said. Tell me I am imagining the way you look at me. Tell me last night when we talked for an hour about nothing important, you were not thinking the same things I was thinking. Lauren's heart slammed against her ribs. What were you thinking? He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. That I have never wanted anyone the way I want you. That every time you smile, I forget what I am supposed to be doing. That watching you with my son makes me believe in things I thought I lost 2 years ago. Anthony, we cannot. I know. You are my employer. I take care of Mateo. If we cross this line, everything gets complicated. I know that too. Then why are we still standing here? His jaw clenched. Because I cannot make myself walk away from you. Lauren felt her resolve crumbling. She lifted her hand, intending to push him back, to create space. Instead, Her fingers brushed against his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath the fabric of his shirt. Anthony inhaled sharply. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm flat against him. Lauren. Her name sounded like a prayer. They were a breath apart. One move, one moment of weakness, and everything would change. Anthony pulled back abruptly, running both hands through his hair. This cannot happen. I will not do this to you. I will not ruin the only stable thing in Mateo's life because I cannot control my own feelings. Lauren felt the rejection like a physical blow, even though she knew he was right. Okay. You should go. Okay. She walked to the door on shaking legs. Her hand was on the knob when Anthony spoke again. For what it is worth. If things were different, if you were not Mateo's nanny, if I were a different man, I would not have hesitated. Lauren looked back at him. He stood in the middle of his office, looking more lost than she had ever seen him. I know, she said softly. Then she left. The following days were torture. They avoided being alone in the same room, kept conversations focused strictly on Mateo, maintained professional distance, even when every cell in Lauren's body screamed at her to close the gap between them. Mateo noticed. Children always did. He became clingy with Lauren, following her from room to room, asking repeatedly if she was leaving, if she would be back tomorrow, if she promised to stay. His progress, so remarkable over the past weeks, stalled. He spoke less, played less, watched Lauren with anxious eyes. Lauren's heart broke a little more each day. Not just for herself, but for this small boy who had already lost so much and now sensed something else slipping away. She did not know how to fix this. Did not know if it could be fixed. All she knew was that falling in love with Anthony Pellegrini had been inevitable. And now, they were all paying the price for it. The 10th week started with a photograph. Lauren found it on Wednesday afternoon, tucked inside a plain white envelope that had been placed in the mailbox near the front gate. She and Mateo had just returned from their daily walk around the property grounds when she noticed it, her name written in blocky letters across the front. No return address. No stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it. The mailbox sat outside the inner gates, at the edge of the drive where delivery vans and strangers could reach it without ever crossing into the estate itself. It was meant to keep the public out, but it also meant anyone bold enough could leave something behind with a few seconds of nerve and luck. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it, while Mateo ran ahead toward the house, calling out to one of the guards about a butterfly he had seen. Inside was a single photograph. Lauren stared at it, her blood running cold. It was her and Mateo, from last week, at the public park 3 miles from the estate where they had gone to feed the ducks. The photo had been taken from a distance, but both of their faces were clearly visible. Mateo was laughing, holding breadcrumbs. Lauren was crouched beside him, smiling. Beneath the photo, words had been cut from newspaper and glued to the paper in that classic ransom note style that felt absurd and terrifying at the same time. People close to Pellegrini do not live very long. Lauren's hands shook so badly the paper rustled. Her breath came too fast, her vision tunneling. Someone had been watching them, following them, close enough to take this picture without her noticing, close enough to hurt Mateo. Lauren. Mateo called from the front steps. Are you coming? She forced her voice to work. Yes, sweetheart. Go inside. I will be right there. The moment Mateo disappeared through the door, Lauren ran, not away from the house, but toward it. She took the stairs 2 at a time, the envelope clutched in her fist, her pulse hammering in her ears. She found Anthony in his office on a phone call, his expression focused. He looked up when she burst through the door without knocking, irritation flashing across his face before he registered her expression. I will call you back, he said into the phone and hung up immediately. What happened? Lauren crossed the room and dropped the envelope on his desk. This was in the mailbox. Someone put it there. Anthony pulled out the photograph and the message. For 3 seconds, he was completely still. Then his entire demeanor changed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He picked up his phone and made a call. Ethan, get to my office now. We have a situation. He hung up and looked at Lauren. Sit down. I do not want to sit down. Sit down. It was not a request. Lauren sat, her legs suddenly weak. Ethan Blake appeared in the doorway less than a minute later, his expression alert. "Boss?" Anthony handed him the envelope. "Someone delivered this to the property. I want the security footage from the last 24 hours reviewed immediately. I want to know who got close enough to put this in our mailbox without being stopped. I want every guard who was on duty brought in for questioning, and I want lockdown procedures activated effective immediately." "Yes, sir." Ethan studied the photograph, his jaw tightening. "Russians, most likely. I will handle it." Ethan left. Anthony turned to Lauren, his eyes scanning her face, her hands as if checking for injuries. "Did you see anyone suspicious when you found this?" "No, it was just there." "Did you touch anything else? The mailbox itself?" "No, just the envelope." "Good." He pulled his phone out again, typing rapidly. "I am increasing your security detail. You will have 2 guards with you at all times when you leave this property. 3 when you are with Mateo. Anthony, this is not negotiable." Lauren stood up, her fear transforming into something else. "I need you to tell me everything. Right now. No more vague explanations about business or security protocols. If someone is threatening me, if Mateo is in danger, I need to know exactly what I am dealing with." Anthony looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You are right. Sit back down." Lauren sat. Anthony moved around the desk and leaned against it, arms crossed, his expression grim. 2 months ago, I took control of a section of Newark Port that had previously been operated by a Russian organization. It was not a hostile takeover. The territory was offered to me by a third party who owed me a favor. But the Russians see it differently. They believe I stole what was theirs, and they have been testing my defenses ever since. Testing how? Small moves. Watching my properties. Following my people. Trying to find weak points. His jaw clenched. "You and Mateo are now identified as weak points." Lauren felt her stomach turn over. "Because they saw us together. Because they saw how much you matter to him. To us." Anthony's voice was rough. "They want to pressure me into giving back the port. Using people I care about to force my hand is a standard tactic. So what happens now? Now I make sure they understand that touching you or Mateo means war." He pushed off the desk and paced to the window. "I will reach out through intermediaries. Make it clear that any move against either of you will be met with extreme consequences." Lauren processed this, her mind racing. What if that is not enough? What if they do not care about consequences? Then I will give them back the port. She stared at him. "You would do that?" Without hesitation. He turned to face her. "No business deal, no territory. Nothing is worth risking Mateo's life, or yours." The weight of that statement settled over her. Anthony Pellegrini, who built an empire on never backing down, would surrender for them. "Teach me," Lauren said suddenly. Anthony frowned. "Teach you what?" "About your world, the rules, the players, how to identify threats." She stood, moving closer to him. "I do not want to be vulnerable because of ignorance. If I am going to be a target, I need to know how the game works." Anthony studied her, surprise evident in his expression. "Most people would run, would quit, take the money I offered them, disappear. I am not most people." Lauren met his eyes. "And I am not leaving Mateo. So teach me how to survive this." He nodded slowly. "All right." Over the next several days, Anthony educated Lauren on things she had never wanted to know. He explained the hierarchy of organized crime families in the Northeast, described territories, alliances, long-standing feuds, taught her to recognize different types of surveillance, how to spot a tail, what behaviors indicated a genuine threat versus intimidation tactics. Lauren absorbed everything, asked intelligent questions, took mental notes. She learned that the Russians were led by a man named Dmitry Volkov, that they operated primarily out of Brighton Beach, that their reputation was built on brutality and unpredictability. She learned that Anthony's organization, while involved in illegal activities, operated under a strict code. No drugs, no trafficking, no harming civilians unnecessarily. Protection, territory management, conflict resolution in communities where law enforcement was ineffective or corrupt. It did not make it legal, but it made it more complicated than she had thought. Anthony also moved her bedroom. Not subtly, not with gentle suggestions, but with direct orders. On Friday evening, she arrived to find her belongings already transferred to a guest room in the private wing of the house, 3 doors down from Mateo's room and 2 from Anthony's. "You need to be close," Anthony said when she confronted him about it. "If something happens, if there is an emergency, I need to reach you in seconds, not minutes." Lauren wanted to argue, but she could not. Not when the logic was sound. Mateo noticed the changes immediately, the increased security, the tension radiating from both adults, Lauren's new bedroom location. He became anxious, clingy, watching Lauren with worried eyes. One afternoon, he asked her directly, "Are the bad men coming back?" Lauren's heart broke. She knelt down to his level, keeping her voice steady. "Your papa is making sure we are all very safe. No one is going to hurt us. Promise?" "I promise." But Mateo's regression was undeniable. He spoke less, played less enthusiastically, needed constant reassurance that Lauren would not leave. His nightmares returned. Though less intense than before, Lauren maintained their routines exactly, giving him the stability he needed, even as her own fear simmered beneath the surface. She did not sleep well. Every sound in the unfamiliar room made her jump. Every creak of the old house settling felt like footsteps. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, playing through worst-case scenarios until exhaustion finally dragged her under. Tuesday night of the 11th week, after a particularly difficult day where Mateo had refused to let Lauren out of his sight for more than 5 minutes, Lauren finally got him to bed. She sang Stella Stellina 3 times before his eyes closed, his small hand wrapped around hers. She carefully extracted herself and stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind her. The panic hit without warning. Her chest tightened. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The walls felt too close. The photograph flashed in her mind, Mateo's face so clear in that image, so vulnerable. Lauren pressed her back against the wall and tried to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the breathing technique she had learned years ago. It was not working. "Lauren." She looked up. Anthony stood at the end of the hallway, his expression shifting from concern to alarm as he took in her state. He closed the distance quickly, his hands hovering near her shoulders, but not touching. "Look at me." "Lauren." "Look at me." She forced her eyes to focus on his face. "Breathe with me," he said. "In. Hold. Out. Again. In. Hold. Out." Lauren followed his instructions, her breath slowly evening out. The panic receded gradually, leaving her exhausted and shaky. Anthony's hand finally made contact, steadying her elbow. "Come on. My office." He guided her downstairs, his presence solid beside her. In his office, he sat her in one of the leather chairs and poured water from a decanter on the sidebar. He pressed the glass into her hands. "Drink." Lauren drank. The water was cold, grounding. Anthony pulled his desk chair around and sat across from her, elbows on his knees, watching her carefully. "When did the panic attack start?" "That was the first one." "First one this week or first one ever?" "Ever." Lauren set the glass down. "I have never felt like that before." Anthony nodded slowly. "Fear does that sometimes. Builds up until it has to go somewhere." "I am not brave," Lauren said, the confession spilling out. "Everyone keeps acting like I am handling this so well, but I am terrified. Every time Mateo is out of my sight, I think something terrible is going to happen. Every car that drives past the house, every person I do not recognize, every sound at night. I am constantly afraid. You are braver than you think." "No, I am not." "Lauren, courage is not the absence of fear." Anthony leaned forward. "It is being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You found that photograph, and your first instinct was to bring it to me. To protect Mateo. Not to run, not to quit, but to fight. That is courage." Lauren's throat tightened. "It does not feel like courage. It never does when you are the one living it." They sat in silence for a moment. Anthony's hand moved, covering hers on the armrest of the chair. His palm was warm, solid, real. "I will keep you safe," he said quietly. "Both of you, I swear it. You cannot control everything. I can try." Lauren looked at their hands, his fingers curled gently around hers. This was dangerous. This moment, this touch, this feeling building between them despite every reason to stop it. "Anthony," she whispered. He met her eyes, and she saw it there. The same fear, the same longing, the same impossible situation reflected back at her. For several heartbeats, neither of them moved. The office was quiet, except for the distant ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. Then Anthony pulled his hand back slowly, deliberately. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Lauren nodded and stood on unsteady legs. At the door, she paused. "Thank you. For this. For helping me breathe. Anytime." She left before she could do something foolish. Like walk back across that office and close the distance between them that was becoming harder to maintain every single day. In her new bedroom, 3 doors from his, Lauren lay in the dark and thought about Anthony's hand on hers. About the way he looked at her like she was the solution to a problem he had been trying to solve for 2 years. She was falling deeper. She knew it. And based on the way he had pulled back tonight, the visible effort it took him to maintain distance, he was falling too. They were both terrified, but not just of the Russians. They were terrified of each other. The call came at 6 in the morning, jolting Anthony awake. Ethan's voice was clipped, efficient, controlled in the way that meant something significant had happened. "We caught one. He was trying to plant a listening device in the garden. The team has him in the holding room." Anthony was out of bed and dressed in under 3 minutes. He paused outside Lauren's door, considered waking her, then decided against it. She needed rest. He would handle this. The holding room was in the basement, accessed through a door most people assumed led to storage. The man sitting in the metal chair was young, maybe 25, with the hard eyes of someone who had seen violence early and often. 2 of Anthony's security personnel stood against the wall, arms crossed, expressions blank. Anthony pulled up a chair and sat down across from the Russian. "Who sent you?" The man said nothing. Anthony sighed. "I can do this 2 ways. The easy way, where you answer my questions and walk out of here alive. Or the hard way, where I spend the next several hours making you wish you had chosen differently. I am a patient man. But my patience has limits when someone threatens my family." The young man's jaw tightened. Then, surprisingly, he spoke. His English was accented but clear. "Volkov sent me. He wants to know what you are planning. Says you have been too quiet." "And what else did Volkov want?" A pause. Then, "He wants the woman, the one who takes care of your son. He says if we bring her, you will return the port without negotiation." Anthony's blood went cold. His hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists. "If you had succeeded in taking her, you would already be dead. You understand that, correct?" The man nodded. "Good. Here is what you are going to do. You are going to contact Volkov and tell him I want a meeting. Neutral territory. Just him and me and our respective security. No tricks, no ambushes. A conversation between professionals. And if he refuses, he will not refuse, because I am going to offer him something he wants more than he wants blood." By noon, the meeting was arranged. Friday evening, 6 o'clock, at Luciano's, an Italian restaurant in Manhattan that had been closed to the public for renovations. Neutral ground that neither organization controlled. Anthony stood in front of the bathroom mirror knotting his tie for the 3rd time. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. Everything about this meeting was a risk. Bringing Lauren was an even greater risk. But Volkov had been explicit in his demands. He wanted to see her, to confirm she was not an undercover agent, to verify that Anthony's protection of her was genuinely personal and not strategic. A knock on his bedroom door. "Come in." Lauren stepped inside, and Anthony's breath caught despite the circumstances. She wore burgundy pants with a matching blazer, simple but elegant. Her hair was down, falling over her shoulders in soft waves. She looked confident, composed. Nothing like the terrified woman who had shown him the photograph 10 days ago. "Ethan said you wanted to see me before we left," Lauren said. "Yes." Anthony gestured to the sitting area near the window. "Sit, please." Lauren sat on the edge of the leather sofa, hands folded in her lap. Anthony sat across from her in the matching chair. "This meeting tonight," he began. Volkov is going to ask you questions. Personal questions. Questions designed to make you uncomfortable, or to test whether you are telling the truth. What kind of questions? About our relationship. About why you are here. About whether you are working for someone else. Anthony leaned forward. I need you to answer honestly. Do not try to protect me or make things sound better than they are. Men like Volkov can smell lies from across a room. Just tell him the truth. Lauren nodded. I can do that. If at any point you feel unsafe, if anything happens that makes you want to leave, you signal me. Any signal. Touch your hair, clear your throat, anything. I will get you out immediately. Anthony, I trust you. Those 4 words landed like a blow. Anthony looked at her, at the calm certainty in her expression, and he felt something inside his chest crack open. I do not know if you should, he said quietly. Well, I do anyway. The restaurant was in Tribeca, a neighborhood that balanced old New York charm with modern wealth. Luciano's occupied a corner building with large windows that had been covered with brown paper from the inside, blocking any view in or out. Anthony's car pulled up first. Ethan exited, scanned the street, then opened the door for Anthony and Lauren. 3 additional SUVs flanked them, security personnel emerging in coordinated precision. Inside, the restaurant was dim despite the overhead lights. Tables had been pushed to the sides, leaving the center of the space open, except for one table set with 2 chairs facing each other. The smell of garlic and tomatoes lingered in the air from the kitchen, evidence that someone had been cooking recently. Dmitry Volkov was already there, standing near the bar with 2 large men in dark suits. He was in his 50s, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and cold gray eyes. When he saw Anthony and Lauren enter, his expression shifted to something resembling amusement. Pellegrini, Volkov said, his accent thick. You actually brought her. I did not think you would. You made it a condition of the meeting, Anthony replied. I honor conditions. Volkov's gaze moved to Lauren, assessing her from head to toe in a way that made Anthony's jaw clench. So this is the woman who has made you so protective. Come closer. Let me see you. Lauren stepped forward without hesitation. Anthony wanted to reach out, to keep her behind him, but he forced himself to stay still. Volkov circled her slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. What is your name? Lauren Mitchell. How long have you worked for Pellegrini? Almost 3 months. And what exactly do you do for him? I take care of his son. Matteo. Just the son? Volkov's smile was sharp. Nothing else? Lauren met his eyes directly. I teach Matteo Italian. I help him with his development. I make sure he is safe and happy. That is my job. But you are more than an employee now, yes? Volkov glanced at Anthony. Otherwise you would not be here. I care about Matteo very much, Lauren said carefully. And about his father. Volkov laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the empty restaurant. She is honest. I like her. He turned to Anthony. She is not a spy. I can see that much. Your weakness is genuine. Anthony's hands curled into fists. Can we sit down and discuss terms? Yes. Let us negotiate. They sat at the central table, Anthony and Volkov facing each other, while Lauren was directed to a chair several feet away, flanked by Ethan on one side and one of Volkov's men on the other. The positioning was deliberate. She was close enough to hear, but far enough to feel like a hostage. You want the port back? Anthony said without preamble. I am willing to return operational control. Volkov raised an eyebrow. Just like that? No fight? I do not need the port. It was offered to me as payment for a separate debt. I accepted because it was good business, but it is not worth starting a war over. And yet you held on to it for 2 months, because I do not respond well to threats. But now you have made your intentions clear. You want to use my family to force my hand. So I am removing that option by giving you what you want. Volkov leaned back in his chair, studying Anthony. What assurances do I have that you will not just take it back once I stop watching? You have my word, and you have a contract, which my attorney will draw up tonight, transferring all rights and operational control back to your organization. Anthony's voice hardened. In exchange, you leave my family alone, permanently. No more surveillance, no more threats, no more tests. My son and everyone connected to him are off limits. Including her? Volkov nodded toward Lauren. Especially her. Volkov considered this, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled. You know, Pellegrini, I always respected you. You are smart, you are ruthless when necessary, but you are not needlessly cruel. This is why I agreed to meet. Then we have an agreement? Under one condition. I want to ask your woman one more question. Anthony's jaw clenched. What question? Volkov ignored him, focusing on Lauren instead. Miss Mitchell, tell me. Why do you stay? You know what he is. You know the danger that comes with being close to him. You could leave, find a safer life, a normal life. Why stay? Lauren did not hesitate. Because Matteo needs me. And because I choose to be here. Even knowing you could die? Everyone could die, Lauren said calmly. I would rather die having mattered to someone than live safely having never risked anything. Volkov stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. You found a rare one, Pellegrini. Hold on to her. I intend to. Volkov stood, extending his hand. We have an agreement. The port is yours to return, and your family will not be touched. You have my word. Anthony stood and shook his hand, the grip firm and brief. Your word is enough. One more thing, Volkov added. When you marry her, invite me to the wedding. I want to see how this story ends. Anthony did not respond, but something flickered across his face that might have been surprise. The drive back to Greenwich was silent for the first 15 minutes. Lauren sat in the back seat of the armored SUV, her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window at the passing lights of the city. Anthony sat beside her, jaw tight, shoulders tense, radiating barely controlled emotion. Finally, Lauren spoke. Did I say something wrong? Did I compromise the negotiation? Anthony turned his head sharply to look at her. What? You have been silent since we left. I thought maybe I answered Volkov's questions incorrectly, or... No. Anthony's voice was rough. You were perfect. You were exactly what you needed to be. Then why do you look like you want to put your fist through a window? Anthony exhaled, a long, shaky sound. Because being in that room with those men, knowing they had discussed taking you, knowing they had considered hurting you to get to me, his voice broke. He stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. I have spent 2 years building walls to protect Matteo, to make sure nothing could ever touch him the way losing Bianca touched him. And 3 months ago, you walked into our lives and became someone I need to protect just as much. Maybe more. Lauren's breath caught. Anthony, I cannot keep pretending you are just Matteo's nanny, he continued, the words pouring out now like he could not hold them back anymore. I cannot keep acting like I do not think about you every minute of every day. Like the idea of something happening to you does not terrify me more than any business threat I have ever faced. Like I do not want... He stopped, his hands curling into fists on his knees. Like you do not want what? Lauren whispered. He turned fully toward her, his eyes burning with intensity. Like I do not want you. All of you. In every way possible. The air between them felt electric, charged with months of tension and denied attraction and fear and longing all tangled together. Lauren's voice came out barely audible. Then stop pretending. Anthony moved before she could take another breath. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. He found none. He kissed her. Not gently, not tentatively, but with the desperate hunger of a man who had been starving for months. Lauren kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands sliding up his chest to grip his jacket, pulling him closer. The kiss was everything they had been denying themselves. Urgent, consuming, inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said. I know. There is no going back from this. I do not want to go back. Anthony pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest, and Lauren felt his heart pounding as hard as hers. Through the partition separating them from the driver, she could see Ethan's eyes in the rearview mirror, carefully focused on the road ahead, giving them privacy. What happens now? Lauren asked quietly. Anthony's arms tightened around her. Now we figure out how to make this work. You, me, Matteo, a family. A complicated family. The best things always are. They stayed like that for the rest of the drive, wrapped around each other in the back seat of an armored car, heading home through the dark Connecticut night. Outside, the world continued turning, dangerous and uncertain. But inside this moment, they had each other, and for now, that was enough. The first month after the meeting with Volkov felt like learning to breathe in a new way. Lauren and Anthony moved carefully around their changed relationship, aware that every decision they made now affected Matteo more than just themselves. They decided early on that introducing the shift gradually was crucial. Matteo had already lost one mother. The last thing he needed was adults complicating his life with sudden, dramatic changes he could not understand. So they started small. The first week, Anthony began holding Lauren's hand during dinner, just casually, his fingers wrapping around hers while they ate pasta or cut vegetables, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Matteo noticed immediately, his dark eyes tracking the movement, but he said nothing. He simply smiled and went back to his food. The second week, Anthony kissed Lauren's forehead when he left for meetings. A brief touch of his lips against her skin, while Matteo watched from the living room floor where he was building with blocks. Again, Matteo observed. Again, he smiled. No fear, no confusion, just quiet acceptance. By the third week, they were sitting closer on the couch during movie nights, Anthony's arm around Lauren's shoulders. Matteo curled between them with a bowl of popcorn. The boy seemed to relax into the new arrangement, as if something that had been out of balance was finally settling into place. Lauren officially stopped being an employee. The paperwork was handled by Anthony's attorney, a kind older man named Mr. Yu Sullivan, who had smiled knowingly when Anthony explained the situation. Lauren was no longer paid a salary. She was family. She stayed because she chose to. Because she loved Matteo. Because she loved Anthony. Because this house had become her home in ways her apartment in Stamford never had. She still cared for Matteo, but now it felt different. More like what it actually was. A mother figure loving a child, not a professional fulfilling contractual obligations. Anthony made changes too. Larger ones that Lauren only learned about gradually. He transferred the more dangerous aspects of his business operations to trusted associates, men who had been with his organization for decades. He kept oversight, kept decision-making authority, but he was no longer the one handling situations that required violence or risk. "I am not doing this because I think my work is wrong," he explained one night after Matteo was asleep. They were in his office, Lauren curled in the leather chair while Anthony sorted through papers. "I am doing it because I want to be here, present, alive. For you and for him." "I know," Lauren said softly, "and I am grateful. You should not have to be grateful for me choosing my family over business. But I am anyway." The third month brought a question they had both been anticipating but dreading. Matteo had been quieter than usual all day, watching Lauren and Anthony with an expression that suggested he was working through something complex in his 4-year-old mind. At dinner, he finally asked it. "Is Lauren going to be my new mama?" The table went silent. Anthony set down his fork carefully. Lauren's chest tightened. Anthony pushed his chair back and knelt beside Matteo's seat, bringing himself to eye level with his son. "Can I tell you something important?" Matteo nodded. "No one will ever replace your mama. She loved you more than anything in the world, and that love does not go away just because she is not here anymore." Anthony's voice was steady, gentle, but Lauren is someone very special. She is someone we both love very much, and who loves us. She is going to be part of our family, not instead of Mama, but in addition to her. Do you understand? Matteo was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he looked at Lauren. "Do you love Papa?" "Very much," Lauren said honestly. "And you love me?" "More than you know." Matteo turned back to his father. "Mama would like her, I think. Mama always said you needed someone nice." Anthony's face crumpled. Lauren watched as tears spilled down his cheeks, the first she had ever seen from him. He pulled Matteo into a tight embrace, his shoulders shaking. "Yes. Anthony whispered against his son's hair. Mama would like her very much. Matteo hugged him back, small arms wrapping around his father's neck. It is okay to be happy, Papa. Mama would want us to be happy. Lauren pressed her hand to her mouth, her own tears flowing freely. This child, this beautiful, wise, healing child had just given his father permission to move forward. After Matteo went to bed that night, Anthony found Lauren in the library. He did not say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her while he cried, really cried, for the first time since Bianca's funeral. I thought I would feel guilty, he said when he could finally speak. I thought loving you would mean betraying her memory. But Matteo is right. She would want this. She would want him to have a mother figure. She would want me to find happiness again. She sounds like she was an incredible person, Lauren said. She was. And you are too. Anthony pulled back to look at her. Thank you for not trying to erase her, for honoring her place in our lives. She gave you Matteo. She made you who you are. I could never erase that. I would never want to. The following month settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Samantha visited regularly, immediately declaring herself Matteo's honorary aunt, and showing up with presents and jokes and the kind of chaotic energy that made the serious household feel lighter. Anthony tolerated her with surprising patience, even seeming to enjoy her direct manner that did not treat him with the careful deference most people showed. I like her, he told Lauren after one of Samantha's visits. She keeps you grounded, reminds you of who you were before all of this. She reminds me I am still that person, Lauren corrected. This life has not changed who I am. It has just given me more people to love. In the 8th month, Lauren took Anthony and Matteo to New Jersey, to the cemetery where her parents were buried. It was the first time she had visited in over a year, the first time since meeting Anthony and Matteo. She knelt in front of the double headstone, Matteo standing beside her with flowers they had picked together, Anthony slightly behind them with his hand on her shoulder. Mama and Papa, Lauren said softly, I want you to meet some people. This is Anthony. He is kind and strong and loves his family more than anything. And this is Matteo. He is smart and sweet and makes me laugh every single day. Her voice broke. I think you would have loved them. Matteo carefully placed the flowers in front of the headstone. Hi, Lauren's Mama and Papa. She takes good care of me. You did a good job teaching her. Anthony squeezed Lauren's shoulder, his own throat tight. They would be proud of you, he said quietly. The woman you have become, the life you have built. They would be so proud. Lauren leaned back against him, letting him support her weight. I hope so. In the 11th month, Anthony planned a trip. He told Lauren they were going to Italy, that he wanted to show Matteo the country where his mother was from, where Lauren had spent 3 of the happiest years of her life. He did not mention that he had other plans. They stayed in Tuscany, in a villa surrounded by vineyards that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. Matteo ran through the rows of grapes, laughing, while Lauren and Anthony walked slowly behind him, hands intertwined. On their 3rd evening there, Anthony drove them to a small winery he claimed had the best view of the sunset. They walked up the hill as the sky turned orange and gold, Matteo between them, holding both their hands. At the top, looking out over valleys dotted with cypress trees and stone houses, Anthony knelt down. Matteo, he said, can you give me the thing we talked about? Matteo's face split into a huge grin. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, holding it carefully. Anthony took it, then looked up at Lauren, whose hand had flown to her mouth in shock. Lauren Mitchell, Anthony said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. 3 months ago, you walked into my house for a job interview. You sang to my son. You brought light back into our lives. You taught me that loving again does not mean forgetting. That family can be built, not just born. He opened the box, revealing a ring. Not a new ring, a redesigned ring, the center stone from Bianca's original engagement ring, but reset with new, smaller stones surrounding it. This was Bianca's. Her family helped me redesign it, not to replace her, but to honor the fact that love continues, that her love led to you. Will you marry me? Will you be Matteo's mother and my wife? Lauren was crying too hard to speak. She nodded frantically, and Matteo cheered, jumping up and down. Anthony stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting the entire valley in shades of rose and amber. I am going to have a mama again, Matteo said happily. A real one. You always had a real one, Lauren said, kneeling to hug him. But now you have two, one in heaven watching over you, and one here who loves you with her whole heart. The wedding happened 2 months later, in January, at the mansion in Greenwich. It was small, intimate. Only the people who truly mattered. Samantha stood as Lauren's maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. Ethan stood beside Anthony, his normally stoic expression softening when the vows began. Matteo was the ring-bearer, carrying the bands on a small silk pillow with such seriousness that several guests had to hide their smiles. He wore a tiny suit that matched his father's, his hair combed neatly, his face glowing with pride. The ceremony took place in the garden where Lauren and Matteo had spent so many afternoons. White chairs arranged in neat rows, flowers everywhere. String lights hung between the trees, ready to illuminate everything once the sun set. Lauren wore a simple ivory dress, elegant but not elaborate, with her hair down the way Anthony loved it. She walked down the makeshift aisle alone, having no father to give her away, but not feeling alone at all. Not with Samantha grinning at her from the front row, not with Matteo standing beside Anthony bouncing on his toes with excitement, not with Anthony watching her approach like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever whispered. The vows were personal, written by them, not from any standard ceremony. Lauren spoke first, her voice clear. Anthony, you taught me that family is not about perfection. It is about showing up, about trying, about loving through fear and pain and uncertainty. Matteo, you taught me that healing is possible, that joy can return even after darkness. I promise to love you both with everything I have. I promise to honor the memory of Bianca, to make sure Matteo always knows his mother's love. I promise to build a life with you both that would make her proud. Anthony's voice was rougher when he spoke. Lauren, you brought us back to life. You gave Matteo his voice and gave me permission to be happy again. I promise to protect you, to support you, to love you for all of my days. I promise to be the father Matteo deserves, and the husband you deserve. I promise that our family will always come first. When they exchanged rings, Matteo handed them over with exaggerated care, and when the officiant pronounced them married, Matteo cheered louder than anyone. At the reception, held in the mansion's ballroom, Lauren stood at the front with Anthony and Matteo on either side of her, and she sang, Stella Stellina, the song that had started everything. Her voice filled the room, soft and clear. Anthony joined in, his deeper voice harmonizing with hers. Then Matteo, his young voice bright and joyful. The guests fell silent, watching as this newly formed family sang together, their voices blending into something beautiful and whole. When the song ended, there was not a dry eye in the room. Later, as the sun set and the lights came on and people danced and laughed, Lauren stood in the garden watching it all. Samantha was dancing with Ethan, making him smile despite his attempts to stay professional. The guards who had become familiar faces over the past few months were actually relaxing, eating cake, talking with other guests. Even the housekeeper, Teresa, was laughing at something someone had said. Anthony found her there, wrapped his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking about? About how much has changed in just a few months. About how I almost did not take this job because it scared me. I am glad you did. Me too. Matteo ran up to them, his suit jacket abandoned somewhere, his tie hanging loose. Papa, Lauren, come dance with me. They followed him back inside, the three of them dancing in a small circle while music played and friends celebrated around them. Matteo was talking animatedly about something, switching between English and Italian without noticing, his hands gesturing wildly the way Italian children did. You know what I want? Matteo said suddenly. What? Lauren asked, smiling down at him. A baby brother. Or a sister. I am not picky. Anthony and Lauren looked at each other over his head, surprise and amusement in both their eyes. Well, Anthony said slowly, that is something we can discuss. Good. Because I think Mama would want me to be a big brother. I would be very good at it. Lauren laughed, pulling him into a hug. Yes, you would be. That night, after all the guests had left and Mateo was finally asleep, exhausted from excitement, Lauren and Anthony stood in their bedroom, the one they would now share, and looked at each other. Are you happy? Anthony asked. Happier than I ever thought possible, Lauren answered honestly. You? Yes. He pulled her close. I never thought I would have this again. A family, love, a future that feels worth living. We have all of that now. We built it together. Through the window, they could see the garden where they had gotten married, the lights still twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere in the house, Mateo slept peacefully, his nightmares mostly gone, his voice strong and sure, his heart healing day by day. Lauren thought about the scared woman who had walked into this mansion only a few months ago for a job interview. That woman had been alone, grieving her parents, wondering if she would ever find a place where she truly belonged. Now she was home. She had found a child who needed her, a man who loved her, a family that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. And it had all started with a simple Italian lullaby sung to a frightened little boy who just needed someone to see him. Stella Stellina. Little star. Sometimes the smallest moments change everything.